Hello everyone, my name is Sika and welcome back to my channel. Before we get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have subscribed to my channel. It truly does mean a lot and I'm so excited to get more content out to you guys. And for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button and turn on notifications so you'll know as soon as any new videos are posted. Now with that out of the way, the topic we're going to be covering tonight is the attempted murder of Susan Kuhnhausen. So let's go ahead and get into it. Before the dawn of Tinder, many people took to their local newspaper to post personal ads looking for love. Susan, a 33-year-old nurse in Portland, Oregon, was never great at relationships. In 1988, her mother and one of her close friends decided to submit a personal ad in the newspaper to find her soulmate. Susan was naturally outgoing and full of life, so it wasn't surprising that it didn't take long before she received a response. A response from Mike Kuhnhausen stuck out to Susan, and before long, the two began talking on the phone frequently. After more than 100 hours of phone conversation, they decided it was time to finally meet in person. Within a year, the two lovebirds drove to Reno and married in 1989. Unfortunately, things turned bad quickly for the couple. Mike lived a fairly simple life, working as a janitorial supervisor for an adult video company. He struggled with depression, which contributed to a cycle of chain smoking and abuse towards his wife. Soon their regular outings and hikes stopped. He began tracking Susan's spending habits, criticizing her for small purchases, and became angry when she made plans to leave the house. After 17 long years of marriage, Mike's abusive tendencies became too much for Susan, and she realized she just wasn't happy. In 2005, she put her foot down and kicked Kuhnhausen out of the house. He moved back in with his father. The following year, Michael lost his job. He had no income and needed to find a way to make money, so he started formulating a plan. By this time, Susan had already updated her life insurance policy to be paid out to her brother, but she still had something of value that he would be entitled to: their house. They had already paid off the house in their time together, and it was worth around $300,000 at the time. Now all he needed to do was find a way to claim it for himself. Michael spoke to one of his employees, a man by the name of Ed Haffey, and offered him a sum of $50,000 to kill his wife. Haffey had a long criminal record and a history of drug abuse. In 1991, Haffey arranged the murder of his ex-girlfriend, whose body was later found along the Umpqua River. In 1994, he pled guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and spent the following 9 years in prison. After his release, Mike offered him a job as a janitor in one of the adult video stores. All things considered, Haffey was the perfect person to perform the act. If he was caught, police would think nothing more of it than a junky criminal burglary gone wrong. In the weeks leading up to the planned attack on Michael's wife, Haffey struggled to keep the ordeal quiet amongst his peers. He told multiple people, including a former prison acquaintance, his drug dealer, and even a random cab driver, that he was going to come into a large sum of money for killing a man's wife. Mike equipped Haffey with the key to Susan's home and the code to disarm the alarm system, neither of which had been changed since Mike had moved. On the afternoon of September 6th, 2006, while Susan was at work, the two began to enact their plan. Mike left a note on the kitchen table, which read, "Sue, haven't been sleeping, had to get away, went to the beach, love me," and then he left the house. Haffey then entered Susan's home, silenced the alarm system, and removed a hammer from his backpack. Making his way into the master bedroom, he found a place to sit and wait for the attack. Susan arrived home at 6:37 p.m. She walked through the house to the front door, went to check the mail, and stood outside for a minute or two before returning indoors. Inside the house, her eyes fixated on her bedroom, which was abnormally dark. As she approached the doorway, Haffey exited the bedroom and lunged towards Susan, hitting her in the left temple with the hammer. The blow wasn't strong enough to seriously injure Susan, and instead of running, she decided to fight back. She quickly closed in and crowded Haffey, knowing if she stayed close to him, he wouldn't be able to hit her with as much force. The nurses in the ER where Susan worked were regularly trained in self-defense, which came in handy as she quickly wrestled the hammer out of the attacker's hand and brought him to the ground. She used the claw of the hammer and slammed it repeatedly into Haffey's skull. Eventually, he grabbed the hammer back, and at that moment, Susan put her hands around his throat and began to choke him. His face turned shades of red, then purple, then blue, before she finally let go and fled to a neighbor's home, who then called 911. The police and medics arrived on the scene and found the attacker dead on arrival. Crime scene investigators began to search the house, finding the ID of Edward Dalton Haffey. Since there was no sign of forced entry or theft, they were able to confirm that this was likely a planned attack. Reasonably shaken by what had just happened, Susan decided to stay with a friend for the night. The next day, Susan returned to the house with a friend to collect some of her belongings. That's when they noticed a strange backpack that seemed out of place. The backpack was turned into the police and they found it belonged to Ed, finding inside a bottle of Hershey's syrup, diabetes medication, $200 cash, a daybook, and a pay stub made out to Haffey. In the daybook, a note was left on the date September 4th, 2006, which read, "Call Mike," and also had a manila envelope listing his new cell phone number. According to Mike's financial records, investigators found that on the day of the attack, Mike drove to the beach and checked into a hotel with a credit card that afternoon. Later that night, he returned to Portland, stopping to buy a .357 Magnum on his way home. On September 8th, 2 days after the attack, Mike left a suicide note at his father's house that read, "All I ever wanted was to be loved, and every time I had it, I fucked it up." Then he left. The police found him 5 days later, on September 13th, at a parking garage outside the Kaiser Sunnyside Medical Center, apparently on his way to check himself into the mental health facility. He told the officers that he had nothing left to live for anymore. The officers put Kuhnhausen on psychiatric hold, then 11 hours later, officially arrested him for conspiracy to commit murder. The day after the arrest, Susan filed for divorce. The events left her shaken and paranoid, finding herself constantly watching her back and circling blocks as she was driving just to make sure no one was following her home.
I am damaged. I am damaged by what you have done to me.
By 2014, Susan moved to a new home in Portland, surrounding her house in gravel so she could hear footsteps approaching the house. She also took up shooting and began practicing frequently at a nearby range. On June 13th, nearly 8 years after the events that had taken place and just 93 days before his release, Mike passed away of cancer while in prison. In 2008, Susan received the Civilian Medal of Heroism for her brave acts. Today, Susan volunteers her time speaking during self-defense classes about her traumatic experience and the importance of knowing how to adequately protect yourself from an attacker. She is a beacon of hope and an inspiration for those struggling with domestic abuse, racism, sexism, and hate. She is also in the process of writing a book about her experiences.